Good morning. This is Tina Spence at the State Department of Education. I'm also here with Ginger Elliott-Teague as we talk through our presentation for correcting noncompliance for indicators 4, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. We are recording this information, so it will be posted on the State Department website for future references. So today we're going to review some of the required activities, including expectations and deadlines, so that everybody is clear in understanding what is expected out of you, where to go to find those programs in order for you to complete those required activities, information on various indicators to assist you through this process, and best practices for improving compliance, and question and answer time. So we wanted to start first by making sure that everybody understood the federal regulation for OSEP Memo 0902, which is basically giving us some information on systemic improvement across the district. So what this means is that, first of all, you're identified and you correct those areas of noncompliance. And then, as a second step to that, we are looking for you to make systemic improvements across your district for whatever area of noncompliance that happened to have been. So we're looking for you to apply those areas of noncompliance to ensure compliance throughout your entire program. So this one here is just implementing 0902. This is kind of a really nice, neat way to look at it. First, you have data submission. It's where you submit information through end of the year, child count, and students not processed timely, and through our monitoring processes. So all of that information is collected. And then there's a calculation for noncompliance on key indicators. And then you have a notification. So in earlier in November, we sent out all the information to you so that you knew where your district lied or where your district stood on all that. And then district responses, you were flagged districts across the reasons for noncompliance, and then we're going to have you develop some improvement plans to assist you as you move through that to correct those compliance. And then the state's review of plans and statements, and we're going to provide you feedback and support where necessary to assist you through this process. And then your implementation, you implement those improvement activities, reviewing any policies, procedures, or practices that may or may not need to be changed to assist you in that compliance. And then the state's review of your implementation and continuous compliance. So that's the second piece of that 0902 memo, where we need you to be compliant across the district. So some dates to remember for the district is December 30th. We need you to submit your indicator review in GMS and your improvement plans. So that is the deadline that we need it submitted for our internal review and to give you guidance and feedback back from that. Once you're finished with that, then January through May is when you need to implement your improvement activities, whatever it is that you said that you have identified as areas that you need to make some changes on or put some different processes or procedures in place for. You need to implement those and check to make sure that they are working. And then in May, we're going to check to see how your plan is working. Are you compliant at that point or not? And then go from there as to giving you additional supports and activities. So the state's activities is through December and January. After you submit your plans, we're going to review them as well as reviewing student records for corrections of noncompliance. In May 2019, we will do a sample check for continuous compliance. Around May 17th, we'll let you know how that continuous compliance check went specific to your district. And then for February of 2020, we report those results to OSEP. So in order to complete the required activities for you guys, you're going to log into single sign-on Grants Management System. As you can see here, there's a link that says Special Ed Compliance. You will click that link and it will take you to the plan on where you're supposed to submit your information. And it's not quite open yet. We will be sending out information hopefully this week to get this up and going. So once that you have gotten in there, then you're going to select your district and click Open Review at the bottom. The next step is you're going to read the overview. So we have an overview tab that'll give you a lot of information in helping you understand what information you need to complete and the timeline as well. And then you have a tab for contact information, so make sure and check that to make sure that information is accurate and correct. And then you're going to select the tab that says District Entry. So this is the tab that's where you're going to enter a lot of your information. So here's what it looks like when you hit the tab that says District Entry. It's going to drop down for each one, a tab for each one of the different indicators, 4, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. You are only going to have access to enter information in these tabs for the ones that you are specifically been identified as non-compliant. So for instance, here, indicator 4, we have that one pulled up, and it says that this page is intentionally left blank because you are compliant for this one. So there's nothing here. If you get this page, there's nothing for you to enter. Now, here's one for indicator 12, that if you click on it and you were identified as not compliant in this area, then you're going to see something very similar to this. It's going to give you areas of needed improvement. So you're going to check the boxes for which you are needing some assistance in there. So you are only completing the indicator tabs for which you did not meet the compliance targets. For indicators 11, 12, and 13, if your achievement rate was 95% or greater, you're only going to need to do the indicator-specific tab. If you were less than 95%, then you will have to do not only the indicator-specific tab, but you will also have to complete the improvement plan tab as well. For indicators 4, 9, and 10, this intent is to determine whether the discrepancy is due to inappropriate policies, practices, or procedures that may have led to over-identification in one or more racial groups for discipline or identified for special ed. And for that area there, improvement plans are only required if your policies, practices, and procedures are inappropriate. So what we need you to do for indicators 4, 9, and 10 only is submit your indicator-specific information to us. The State Department will then review that information, and if we are needing you to complete the improvement plan page, then we will let you know after that. So for your improvement plan activities, this is what that page looks like. Up in the top, you're going to see a box that tells you, or a space that just above the improvement plan activities, where it tells you what indicators that you must address on this page. And this will be tied directly to the areas, the indicators for which you were found to be non-compliant in. So you will need to complete at least one indicator activity for did that pop up on there? So you will need to complete one improvement activity for each indicator for which you were found non-compliant in. There is also a drop box for indicator where you can select to identify for us your improvement activity to tell us which indicator that this is tied to, and then the staff responsible for conducting the activity, and then your anticipated completion date. When you open this page, there's only information for one. Down at the bottom, there is a button down there for you to add additional activities, so you can put in as many as you need, and then be sure and save the page when you are finished. Here we go. So the final step in the grants management system here for you guys is the Submit for Review tab. We've made a few changes to this to hopefully make it a little more streamlined. When you're ready to send this information to the State Department of Ed, you will come to the Submit for Review tab. You'll click the box for Submit for Review and save the page. This will automatically send it to us so that we will have an opportunity to review that. We also have a box there, so if you need to add any additional information that you want to submit to us or make sure we're aware of, there's that box there that you can certainly add other comments or other information to us at that time. Now, what we will do is upon receiving your information, then we're going to review the information that you submitted, and our staff has two options, and you'll see that circled in red down there that the LEA does not need anything else for your monitoring or that we're sending it back for you, and we're going to put some comments and suggestions up there on how we can work together as a team to improve in that area. So here's where we're going to send some information back to you, requesting additional information. It'll give us the date reviewed and then the date that it needs to come back. So if we send this back to you, then you will get an email back letting you know that we need additional information before we can approve your improvement plan. Do you have any questions to this point? So we have one question that yes, the GMS right now, we are finalizing the last bits of the online program there in grants management. We hope to have it finished and information out to you as quickly as possible.
We will have notes available after the presentation also. Okay, so we're moving on. This is Ginger, and we're going to talk about what does compliance mean for the various indicators. These indicators are directly listed in your DDP. So if you need some more information about that, you can check on your DDP, you can check on your determination, what your status is on each of those, and what your rate of achievement was for 11, 12, and 13. Okay, so indicator 4 is disproportionate long-term discipline by race. 9 is disproportionate SPED identification by race, resulting from inappropriate identification. 10 is similar, but it's broken down by disability-specific areas, and we'll talk through in a moment what those are. There are 6 disabilities that we must look at. 11 is your child find, the 45-day timeline between consent and evaluation. 12 is transition from Part C to B, meaning the IEP and evaluation completed by the 3rd birthday. And 13 is that all secondary transition requirements have been met. These are 11, 12, and 13 are considered 100% compliance indicators on the annual performance review. The state must be at 100% compliance, and therefore districts must be at 100% compliance. Any noncompliance, any finding of noncompliance at the student level, we have to report that federally, and that's why we require you to resolve those issues. We do not have a choice about that, and thus we must work with districts to resolve those. For 4, 9, and 10, it's a little bit different. We identify districts based on risk, and we'll talk through that in a moment, it's a comparison of group risks, essentially, and districts that have high risk ratios are checked for whether those are the result of policies, practices, and procedures that are not appropriate. Okay, so 4, 9, and 10 are based on the concept of disproportionality, which is the overrepresentation of a racial or ethnic group in a particular category. So we have categories of discipline and identification. It's measured by a risk ratio that asks this particular question: how likely is one group of students to have X occur compared to all other groups of students? So how likely is one group of students to receive long-term discipline, suspensions, compared to all other groups of students? How likely is one group of students to be identified for special ed compared to all other groups of students? So that is the concept that we are looking at. Comparison of group risks based on something that occurs to those students. So to be flagged, a district has to exceed a particular threshold in each race category pair. So there are 7 racial groups, and across the different, between 4, 9, and 10, there are 8 categories, okay? So for indicator 4, the threshold is 2.5. For 9 and 10, it is now 2.6. We changed it to 2.6 to align with significant disproportionality, okay? That's the threshold that we use for significant disproportionality. So we raised that a bit for 9 and 10, so the numbers would be the same, okay? So notes for 9, and 10. IDEA says disproportionality must not be the result of policies, practices, or procedures that create or lead to either officially or unofficially, intentionally or unintentionally, that create those race-associated outcomes. Okay, so 4 is very explicit. It says policies, practices, or procedures that contribute to significant discrepancy. So we have to review your policies, practices, and procedures. 9 and 10 is similar. It says when that representation in special ed and related services is the result of inappropriate identification. Okay, so that's the language used that we must resolve. So the expectations for 4, 9, and 10, our goal is to determine through this process whether those risk ratios that exceed the targets are the result of those problematic policies, practices, and procedures, okay? So what we have to do is look at those. Last year we did this through a different process in a survey tool. This year we've incorporated it into GMS just to make sure everything is in the same place and there aren't any questions about who has done what. So after review, after you complete your indicator tabs, if those policies, practices, and procedures are determined to be adequate, meaning they're not problematic, then the district will not be listed on the federal report for noncompliance, and you will not have to complete an improvement plan, okay? If we look at those and we determine that they're not adequate in one way or another, if your responses do not resolve the issue, then we will ask you to complete an improvement plan. Last year, I think we had 1 district out of all identified that had to do that, so we don't expect to find issues, but we have to go through this process in order to review those. We are required to review all policies, practices, and procedures in the most feasible way possible. We can't come and observe you in your districts, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on the perspective, but we do have to review those. Okay, so specifically, indicator 4 data. This is a student level count. We look at the cumulative 10 or more, 11 or more days of suspension. So if a student is out one day and then another day the next month, let's say 1 day each month or 2 days each month, that will lead to greater than 10 days of suspension, and that student will be flagged and counted as one of those students that receives cumulative days of suspension for this indicator. Okay, so we group those by race and ethnicity, then we compare the risk between the first group compared to all other groups. Now, we do have district level minimum N sizes and cell sizes of 10, so if a district does not have more than 10 students who are disciplined long-term, suspended long-term, then that will not be calculated. So most districts do not have any calculations at all. We only had 5 districts this year that are flagged for indicator 4, okay? So there aren't very many for indicator 4, simply because most districts are not suspending students at a high rate, okay? So this comes from your discipline report that you submitted in June this summer, certified in July, okay? So if you're wondering where we get that data, you report it to us at the student level in the Ed Plan. So in terms of what you need to look at to assist with identifying areas for improvement, you should be looking at your discipline policies. You should be looking at whether certain groups are identified more frequently than others. If you have a high risk ratio, that means that indeed one group has been identified and suspended more often than other groups. Okay, so you need to look at your data and figure out why that one group is receiving more suspensions than other groups. okay? Is it a particular site? Is it a particular grade level? Those kinds of things, okay? And we are happy to work with you to identify those sources of information. For indicator 9, disproportionality and identification, this again is a student level count. We look at, we group students by race or ethnicity, and then we calculate that risk of being identified for special education compared to all other students' risks. Again, we have a minimum N size and cell size of 10. So if you don't have more than 10 students in special ed in a particular racial or ethnic group, then that risk ratio is not calculated for that group, okay? So each group has to have a minimum of 10 for that to be counted. If you have all one racial group in your district, then that calculation does not occur for all the other groups, and you are compared to the state risk because you don't have enough for those other groups to calculate, okay? We can talk through that individually. It's hard to do that over a webinar. We do have slides on our website on the data page under significant disproportionality that will walk you through those calculations if you are really interested in that. It's kind of detailed, specific calculations, but I know some of you may be interested in looking at those. So this data comes from the 2017 child count that you submitted and was certified last October, a year ago October, okay? So again, what data should you be looking at to identify areas for improvement? You should be looking at why certain groups have been identified more often for special ed than other groups, okay? So thinking about those kinds of things, we can talk through that and work with you to identify that. I think we had 10 or 11 groups identified for indicator 9. I mean districts, 10 or 11 districts identified for indicator 9, so not that many this year. The bigger group was indicator 10, okay? And these are specific disability areas. So for 9, we are required to look at special ed identification overall. For 10, we are required to look within specific disabilities. Autism, emotional disturbance, intellectual disability, OHI, SLD, and SLI, okay? Only those 6. So again, we group by race and ethnicity, we calculate risk by groups, and then we apply that minimum N size. The data source again comes from 2017 child count, your disability information, just primary disability only, we do not look at secondary. And similar information, you'd have to look at why certain groups of students have been identified with particular disabilities more often than other groups, okay? So really looking carefully at who is doing the evaluations, the identifications, who is specifying disability, why that's happening, is it happening at particular sites with particular people, okay? Really looking carefully at why there may be a problem. There may not be one at all. It may just be an artifact of your area and your district. There may not be any problems whatsoever with policies, practices, and procedures. But it is something we do have to look at. So consider those issues, and we will work with you to move forward on those. Okay, so for indicator 11, child find, again, this is a student level count. We look at the percent of timely evaluations out of your total evaluations. It excludes parent reasons for delay. You were required when you submitted your district summary data at end of year in June to provide a list of students with delayed evaluations that fell into the reasons that were not considered parent reasons for delay. Okay, so maybe additional data was required, or calendars or weather were a problem. Any of those kinds of things are considered unexcused delays. And so you report those to us, and then you're considered not compliant for this indicator. We know that it's a pretty strict requirement federally. The indicators we're looking at are 4, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. The 100% requirement, compliance requirement, is a very strict requirement. We know that some districts have difficulty meeting this because of large number of students, different factors in your districts. We understand that, but we are required federally to check each instance of non-compliance and to make a finding on that, okay? So when you're looking at your data to identify areas for improvement, things you can look at are why evaluations aren't timely, okay? Why there's all sorts of whys that you could be looking at. Tina has a great list of questions of whys, so we'll help you through those. But definitely you need to think more deeply than, oh, it's simply because so-and-so doesn't seem to get them in on time. You need to think about why so-and-so isn't getting them on time. Is it because that person isn't getting the data they need in order to complete the evaluations? Is it because there aren't adequate procedures for ensuring timeliness? All sorts of things that you could be looking at, okay? So related to this, someone asked, if you are approaching in an area, you do need to submit an indicator review. You do not need to complete the improvement plan. That's what we had mentioned earlier, that if you have 95% or higher, you only have to do the indicator review. You do not need to complete the improvement plan, okay? So for indicator 12, transition from part C to B, again, student level count. It comes from the end of year collection that you submit to us through the district summary data page. Okay, again, it excludes parent reasons for delay. You had to submit a list of students who had delayed IEPs and evaluations by the third birthday, and we have those lists. So what we'll be doing for 11, 12, and 13 is looking at the lists of students that were non-compliant that you gave to us, and we will be checking to ensure that they are now compliant, that they have been completed. And if you pass that, then the findings of non-compliance, the first step, what's considered student level or prong 1 reviews, we will complete that, and then you complete your GMS, and then we will be doing the subsequent continuous compliance review in May. So there are multiple steps to this, but each one is necessary for federal reporting and federal oversight. Okay. And then finally, indicator 13, secondary transition. Again, a student level count, we look at the percent of compliant IEPs out of all IEPs for grades 9 through 12. Okay. You have to have complete up-to-date transition information, and we judge that by having a completed, renewed, final, active, however you want to call it, IEP prior to June 30th. So if an IEP is out of date, if it has not been updated by June 30th, it's considered non-compliant, okay? And that's how we measure that. We do collect that through the end-of-year data collection. We just pull that data from you. In EdPlan, you do not need to submit anything to us for that. So again, what data do you need to look at to identify areas for improvement? Things like your transition processes. How are IEPs getting reviewed? Who is in charge of that? What's going on that some IEPs haven't been finalized? Perhaps it's an exiting issue. Maybe you aren't exiting your students timely, so they appear to be non-compliant on June 30th, but it's simply that they have graduated, but you haven't exited them prior to the IEP being considered overdue. Okay, there are lots of things that could lead to that also. Any questions about those indicators? I know it's a lot of information all at once. We do have this online. We also have other information on the data page and compliance page about all of these indicators. Okay. We sent you a copy of your district data profile on paper, so you can review that. You can also review it now in the grants management system. So if you go to GMS Access, select, and you select your district, okay, under the applications list, under IDEA, we have a new application. It's called District Data Profile. Surprise, surprise. And all you have to do is open it. You don't have to approve it. You don't have to do anything to it except open it to see that. So if you lose your paper copy of your DDP, it's now in GMS so that you can review your data at any time. So hopefully that will help you sort of see where things are without having to keep track of a piece of paper. Okay. Are there any other questions at this time? You will be receiving an email this week, hopefully in the next day or two, that gives you access to GMS. It will tell you that you must complete the information. It will repeat some of the overview information that's included in GMS, some of what we've talked about here with deadlines and so forth. So look for that email, and once you get it, you can go into GMS and open up your special ed compliance page. If you have additional questions, okay, if you have questions about the data, you can contact me, Ginger. You can also contact Tristan or Travis as part of the data team. If you have questions about the compliance process and GMS specifically, please contact Tina, Felisa, or Cheryl. They'll be glad to help you about that. They are the ones who will be responsible for overseeing and reviewing your indicator reviews and your improvement plans. So those would be great. They're great resources for you as you move forward. Okay, we'll leave this up for a little bit in case you want to write any of this down or if you have additional questions. Thank you. We're glad you participated, and we look forward to hearing from you soon.